Well, I guess it's going to be one of those days where you abuse the host of the program. It's already happened to me early this morning as I was doing my initial show preparation, still sipping coffee at home and sitting at the desk there, going through some material. I came across National Review's February 15th issue. Now, this is going to be in print February 15th. It's online, though, as of last night. The entire issue is devoted to taking down Donald Trump as the Republican nominee for the Republican Party. 22 very well known American conservatives have chimed in and they've done their part for National Review. Knowing that this was going to be a really big story today across the country and perhaps our top story as well, I took that link and I posted it to my Facebook page. I believe I also sent it to LinkedIn. I may have done it with Google Plus as well. And then within a few minutes, one of my former coworkers, now this guy is a talk show host himself, he blew up on me about what a sellout I was and against Trump, and I haven't actually fully endorsed anyone. Well, I take that back. I had been writing checks, campaign contributions to Rand Paul, but when that looked like it was a dead horse, I decided to stop feeding it. And I haven't settled yet on any particular candidate because I'll come across someone that I like, and yet I'll say, yeah, but there's just something. And it happens with a lot of these people that we have as options. So I'm going to wait it out. And back in 2012, I fully supported the Constitution Party candidate instead of Mitt Romney. I think I did end up voting for Romney only because in my home state at the time, the Constitution Party wasn't on the ballot. But I had their candidate on the radio with me multiple times. His name was Virgil Goode, former Republican congressman from Virginia, super guy from the Tidewater area, probably going to be buried in about 3 feet of snow today. So he may not get out and offer much of a protest to anything politically. 8 minutes after 8 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. As it happens, I post lots of things to Facebook. I'm a serial poster. I post things from the op-ed pages of the New York Times and the Washington Post. I don't necessarily agree with them, but these are all things that I talk about during the course of my show and I talk about with friends. Just because you post a link to Facebook doesn't mean it's an endorsement. I think we all understand that, right? So this situation, some of the names, Brent Bozell was just on Fox News. He's among those who was tackling Mr. Trump at this point. Some of the other names are, very familiar. Glenn Beck, of course, has never been in Trump's camp during the course of the last 7 or 8 months. Glenn Beck is very vocal about it. Thomas Sowell, who is one of my favorite newspaper columnists, he's writing as well. I believe Cal Thomas has chimed in. Look, people can have a difference of opinion and still be civil at times about these. We have a handful of callers. Civility really seems to escape them. And then when you go give it back to them, then they jump up and down and say, you're being mean to me. They're like the kid on the playground who ran up and spit in your face. So then you decked him and he ran over to the playground monitor and he said, Billy's being mean to me. Well, Billy might have a right if you just spit all over him. I want to also point out, there's a story out today, and we do need to mention this too quickly. Sarah Palin, earlier this week, when she gave the speech, about 20-minute speech, endorsing Donald Trump, she was making some comments, and she was mocked roundly by the folks in establishment media because, well, in their narrative, Sarah Palin is a dumb dummy, so you can't say anything nice about her or anything that she might say, although today, I happened to be reading a column in the Wall Street Journal by Peggy Noonan, and Noonan said, it isn't that she's a bad speaker, referring to Palin. She said it's more like scat. In other words, what a jazz artist does, a jazz artist gets on stage, and a jazz artist just moves along through various lyrics and sounds and the like. And she says, that's what you get with Sarah Palin. But this is from the Washington Examiner. Press mocks Palin's speech, misses that she was quoting a book. And they mentioned the reference that went right over the heads of many of the reporters who were mocking her. Palin's, quote, keep the main thing, unquote, was a reference to a popular quote by the late best-selling self-help author and businessman Stephen Covey. His most famous book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he wrote that for people aspiring to success, quote, the main thing is to keep the main thing, unquote. Generally, that is understood as a call to maintain focus on a core objective. But all of the liberal nitwits who think they're the smartest people in any room they walk into, all of these large newspapers and the punditry speaking on television, the talking heads. They all thought they knew better. Let's see if they admit that they were wrong. Of course not. Meanwhile, Trump was being asked last night at a news conference about the National Review hit piece today, and he was offering his thoughts. And I'll tell you what, I really don't think that 22 leading conservatives saying we need to stop being delusional about Donald Trump is going to have any impact whatsoever on people who already support Donald Trump.
Are they, do they take it seriously? Are they just whining?
No, the National Review is a dying paper. Its circulation's way down. Not very many people read it anymore. I mean, people don't even think about the National Review. So I guess they want to get a little publicity. But no, that's a dying paper. Really, I mean, it's pretty much, I got to tell you, Dave, pretty much of a dead paper.
And he's right. I used to get a free subscription because I was a radio talk show host. I used to actually get a comp subscription to the National Review. They don't comp people anymore. They can't afford to comp people anymore. And like many of these other publications, Weekly Standard, in fact, Bill Kristol from the Weekly Standard is among those hammering Trump today. They're begging people, especially with the online editions, to send them money. They're worried that if they put up a paywall, no one will read them. At least give credit to the newspapers in Idaho. The majority of them, all you have to do, some people say, well, I don't want to answer a couple of questions before I read the story. But those questions help an advertiser know who's actually looking at it, which supports what's in the online version of the paper. And they're not charging you $9 or $10 a month to take a look at it. I have a couple of newspaper subscriptions. I just let one I canceled one of them. It was the first newspaper subscription, there you go, I ever had in my life, personally, because for years we always had stacks of them delivered to our offices. But I let it go. I'm everything I need to know I can find in its crosstown competition any longer. And so there are ways to get around this. As I say, the questions you might have to answer about what movies you've seen lately or, what's your favorite thermostat. When I have to answer that one, can I be honest? I have no idea. So I just say, well, I know the name Honeywell from advertising, so I click Honeywell and I move on. Turns out Honeywell is one of the choices. 14 minutes after 8 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. If Republicans could give us a candidate potentially who is exciting as Donald Trump, perhaps we wouldn't be after Donald Trump. Many people are supporting him simply because he's put a little energy back into what you would call a very boring process. Speaking of that, watching paint dry, John Kasich joining Sean Hannity last night on Sean Hannity's program on Fox. Isn't this thrilling?
Well, if we become a story, and if I finish in second place, I think probably it is a pretty big story. And the challenge for me, Sean, I'm not the celebrity candidate. People don't really know me across the country, so the national polls have always lagged. And my game plan has always been to do well here because it's only 1.2 million people. It's like running for Congress. And to be able to move here, and we are already on the ground in South Carolina, in Nevada. We're on the ballot in well over 30 states. We think we will do very well in the South. For example, Mississippi, where we have the best organization headed by Trent Lott, Congressman Harper. We're doing well in many states in the South, and at some point we head north and we get to Illinois and Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, all places where we believe we will do very well. So, we think we're very well positioned, and I feel good. And what's really working, Sean, is I tell people, I know we have problems, but we can solve these problems.
Hey, can I get a double strength coffee? I mean, you listen to that guy and you wince when you hear him. Ain't nobody in the South going to vote for an Obamacare-loving Republican from Ohio, first of all. Even in Mississippi, where he's got the turncoat Trent Lott on his side. Trent Lott, who chewed out talk radio back in 2007 when he claimed it was leading the opposition to comprehensive immigration reform. In other words, amnesty, that his handlers, the people who bankrolled his campaigns, wanted. It couldn't get any better than John Kasich, right? Well, how about Jeb Bush?
I think of all the candidates running, while he's the front runner right now for the nomination, he's the one that is least likely to become president. And with all the talk that we do about changing things, the only way it could happen is to elect a conservative president. He's neither conservative nor electable, but we'll let the voters decide that here in New Hampshire, where I am, and starting in Iowa in a couple of weeks.
I look at our slate of candidates, or the slate of the Republican Party candidates. I'm a registered conservative. conservative. I think we got good people running. I really do. And I think,
Yeah, absolutely.
I see Bernie Sanders is now beating Hillary by 27 points in New Hampshire.
I'm going to stop it right there. I mean, my gosh, how much more of that can you take? Both Bush and Kasich are cut from the same tree. They have personalities of a log. 817, we have a caller with us. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story. Go ahead.
Good morning, Bill. One of the primary problems I see with the Republican Party right now is they've been trying to cater to two different ideologies for the last 20, 30 years. The ideology of the donor class, who don't have the same standards and values that the ordinary conservative on the ground has. And they've ignored their base support, and it's finally come to a head. That's why Trump is doing so well. It's just the leadership he displays. I'm not a Trump supporter. I will support him if that comes to it. He's not my first choice. But I can't argue. I was in the military for 21 years, and the leadership he displays, it inspires people. And whether or not he makes the right decision, he's going to make a decision, which a lot of our Republican leadership don't seem to know how to do.
Yeah, and that's a good definition of a leader is someone that says, this is the way we're going, let's go. And sometimes you have to correct the course, but, you get out in front and you do it.
The lack of a decision a lot of times is what is going to get you into more trouble than making the wrong decision in the first place.
Right.
First thing I learned on the battlefield was that the lack of doing something can get people killed far faster than doing the wrong thing.
I thank you much for the call. I mean, it's a great point, and it reminds me of that scene in the movie The Longest Day, Robert Mitchum's character playing the colonel who's leading the men on Omaha Beach, and he finally just stands up under all of this withering fire and says, there's only two ways we're getting off this beach, and number one is we move forward or we die. And so they move forward. They didn't just stay there where they were going to die anyway. 819, Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I'll tell you what, it just seems to me that Pat Buchanan had a column. I get a twice-a-week column from Pat Buchanan in my email, and I saw the latest this morning. It came in last night while I was asleep, but I was taking a look at that this morning, and he said, Donald Trump is the creation of the Republican Party and the establishment at Washington. They don't seem to realize it. When they were telling us for 25, 30 years that every time they closed a factory and moved it overseas and took our jobs away, that it was going to be good for us, we nodded our heads and said, okay, because they would say, Ronald Reagan, Ronald Reagan, Ronald Reagan. Here's a photo of Ronald Reagan. See? Ronald Reagan, Ronald Reagan, Ronald Reagan. And they would tell us there would be an amendment for protecting marriage. And they said that we would get rid of abortion and that we would defund Planned Parenthood. And none of this stuff ever happens. You think perhaps that after lying to people, the boy who cried wolf has been left all alone out on the hill? Bill Colley with you. In a few minutes, we're going to be joined by a guest talking with us about the Meals on Wheels program out of the Twin Falls Senior Center in desperate need of new drivers and volunteers. We've got more coming up. Jeb Bush is live on TV right now as we speak. I was mentioning him earlier. And the folks at Fox News, Bill Hemmer is having Jeb Bush react to the National Review taking on Donald Trump, of course, which is just like saying, all right, Mr. Bush, you stand there at home plate. I'll move in from about 90 feet, and I'll move down to about 15 feet, and I'll just lob a grapefruit at you, and you see if you can hit it. 834, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Next Thursday morning, we're going to be joined on the program by Lieutenant Colonel Steve Heil. I've had him on the air before as a guest. Next Thursday is the 31st anniversary of the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. Steve was the administrator of the Shuttle Challenger Commission, as well as having served as the executive officer with the Air Force Thunderbirds, and then he spent some time as well with the Bush family, lived with the Bush family, as he planned the 1985 Reagan-Bush second inaugural. And he shared on his Facebook page yesterday, ended an email, photograph of he and Jeb Bush on Inauguration Day 31 years ago, which was a couple of days past that anniversary. But he also mentioned, and there's a little note there from Jeb, to Steve at the bottom, that he signed the card with the photograph attached. But Steve says he will not be voting for Jeb Bush. Well, unless, of course, the only other choice is likely Hillary or Bernie Sanders. 8:35, Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Want to remind you, our good friends at Trip Family Medicine are going to be back with us next Wednesday morning between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. They join us on Wednesday mornings, and we have a discussion. We pick a medical topic on a weekly basis, and then we go into some detail on it. You have an opportunity to call the doctor or the physician assistant while they're in the studio. It's a way to get a little free medical advice and talk to a friendly voice about that as well. And we do want to point out that Trip Family Medicine, located on Fillmore Street across from the main post office, they are still looking for new patients. And they also have a system that they put in place where oftentimes you can get in to see a doctor. If you'd like to do it quickly, you can do it within a day or two. And we do that every Wednesday morning between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. And remember, life's too short not to feel good. 736-0300, our telephone number. 736-0300 is our telephone number. And you can also email me at bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. We have a caller with us. You're up next. You're on the air.
Yes, Bill, I've been unable to hear earlier today, and I hope I'm not covering something you already did. If it is, just tell me and I'll shut up. But on this National Review and all these people that are against Trump, I'm very concerned about the conservatives, the Republicans, whatever you want to call us, tearing ourselves apart with this, this thing against Trump. What do you think about that?
Well, we were talking about it earlier, but I'll just add to that. I think it's, in the long run, it's going to be very, very bad for the Republican Party to keep attacking people that they have angered over the course of the last, really, not just 10 years. We're going back 25 years. And realistically, even the Republicans of, I think, the 1960s and 1970s who tried to disavow Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan, that class of people, they just walk around with their noses in the air. The one thing, and I generally respect all of these people who've written in National Review, but I think that there's a class of people who think that they are the guardians of American conservatism and the guardians of the American way, and yet they sit around and they hobnob with each other at all the parties inside the Washington Beltway with their hands in their pockets and in a glass of sherry or whatever else they're drinking. I wouldn't know what they drink at these parties. I suppose champagne or Cabernet. And they stand there and tell each other how bright they are and how they have to make sure that the dumb dummies don't take over the party. And right now, the mood in America is very anti-establishment, including those folks. Trump made an appearance last night with Sean Hannity, and Hannity said, even conservative talk show hosts are telling you to tune it down when it comes to Ted Cruz. This is Trump's response.
Well, I have to go with my own thinking. Don't forget, Ted attacked me, and then I attacked him. But he started, and he attacked me pretty viciously. And, first he was laying back, as we all know. It was, everybody, they said, in the wake. And frankly, he attacked me, Sean. And I have a lot of respect for Mark Levitt. I have a tremendous respect for Rush. Rush has been great for me. Rush has been so amazing. And Mark's been pretty good. I mean, Mark likes Ted, and I think he likes me. But I have to go with my own thinking. And I talked about the fact that, frankly, I think I'm doing the party a favor, and I think I'm doing actually Ted a favor. The fact that he was born in Canada, he was a citizen of Canada until just 15 months ago, and he's got a problem. We have constitutional lawyers that are coming out saying he can't even run.
Now, see, that's Donald Trump taking advantage of that situation. Just shows you how he has been able politically to outfox not only the establishment, but his opponents by dropping that in at the tail end of his remarks there. Coming up on 8:40, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, newsradio1310.com. Pat Buchanan, as I mentioned earlier, you can find Pat Buchanan's latest column if you go to Drudge, and there's a whole list of columnists there. You got to check this out. Is the specter of Trump haunting Davos? Apparently, Joe Biden, somebody had to direct him to get there, obviously. He probably turned left at Greenland and ended up over the Arctic Circle first, but he went to Davos, Switzerland, gave a keynote address, railing against people like Trump and the new nationalism that we're seeing. And the conclusion from Buchanan is, hey, my friends were all predicting this 20 years ago, and it's now come to pass. So the establishment can pick up the ball and go home if they like, but there are more of us, far more of us, than there are of them.